xProfessor here from Rounding Some Corners, also on TikTok. You know, marijuana and the cannabis plant have come so far from where they originally were, as a plant in the ground that can be picked and imbibed on the spot without any additives and receiving the intended effect. However, because of a lot of things that have been layered on top of marijuana that are detailed in this Marijuana as Doxa series, marijuana is not as available as it should be. Yeah, you can get it in dispensaries. Yeah, you can smell it on city streets. Yeah, you can buy it out in the open at markets in some states, but there are lots of restrictions. Why is that? It's because in the absence of a promoted philosophy for marijuana, other philosophies have stepped into the vacuum, partial philosophies that have not been helpful to marijuana's progress in terms of being an equally accessible substance in general life. And so that's what we're talking about in this very final video lecture on Marijuana as Doxa. We are taking on marijuana philosophy as Doxa, and we're going to spell out exactly what that philosophy should be in the opinion of Rounding Some Corners, which is what Rounding Some Corners is all about, reimaging marijuana as a healthy pleasure. And we've done that by taking apart the doxas of race, of history, of marijuana labeled as a drug, of all kinds of dimensions of marijuana that are detailed in this video lecture series. But this is the final one. This is marijuana philosophy as Doxa. And the specific philosophy that we're going to be promoting is as a transition advisor. That is the philosophy of marijuana that will take it to where it needs to go, as a transition advisor. First though, let's talk just for a bit about how available marijuana is today in all its forms. So you have the classic bud. This one is grown in my own backyard. It's a little bit on the brown and dry side, but you can grow this in 4 months and have a nice little bud and all kinds of marijuana at your ready right from your own backyard. Then you go into the dispensary system or some retail outlets and you can get all kinds of marijuana substances ranging from capsules. This one has an RSO quality to it. I'll explain that in a moment, but it has both also THC, which is a cannabinoid, and CBD, which is another cannabinoid. You've got PACE. I call them PACE. This is RSO also. This comes out of a tube. You squeeze it, you put it on your finger, you put it under your tongue, it dissolves with your saliva, and you feel the effects about 45 minutes later. Good for your digestion, many people say. Ranging to tinctures. This one has CBD mixed into it. Actually, it's all CBD, another cannabinoid from the cannabis plant, and this one is taken as a tincture. And so using a dropper, you put 2 or 3 drops underneath your tongue, and the desired effect takes place within 15 to 20 minutes. And then you have vapes. Vapes are the liquefied form of marijuana, often combined with CBD and put into a vaporizer form that is ignited by a battery. And then you have a completely different application method, which is the pump bottle to apply a topical marijuana. This one bills itself as a calming mind-body cream. If you have inflammation, you put it on your joints. If you have a sore spot on your neck, you put it on there. It takes care of the problem. So marijuana has many different forms compared to that original smokable substance. But that isn't enough for marijuana because you can't get to those forms in public places. Try smoking a joint in a park. Try taking some of an RSO paste standing in front of a grocery store. You're going to get some funny looks and maybe even the police will be called upon you. And so marijuana does not enjoy the freedom privileges that coffee, sugar, cigarettes, and many other substances out there enjoy in public places. Let's talk about why. It's because there has not been a philosophy that has promoted marijuana properly. And that has allowed a doxa to settle in along with the other dimensions of doxa that we've talked about in this video lecture series. Remember, doxa is an area of knowledge that gets set aside somewhat accidentally, somewhat on purpose by powerful forces. But the result is it's an area of knowledge that nobody really talks about critically. When they talk about it, they skirt around the edges. And they talk about it as if everybody agrees on the general principles and the underlying assumptions, and therefore there's nothing that needs to be discussed or dissected to see whether the things that we thought were true are really true. As a result, marijuana over decades has been defined as a dangerous drug. And so now we've been taking apart in this video lecture series why it is not a dangerous drug. It is in fact a healthy pleasure. And part of the reason that it has not received the equal treatment that it should is because of the arguments that have been advanced, two of which have been incredibly helpful to equalizing marijuana and getting it into dispensaries, but they haven't gone far enough. The first one is the legal argument, that marijuana should be legally accessible just like other drugs. The chief organization behind this decades-long push has been the NORML organization, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. NORML has been participating in congressional dialogue for decades, and NORML has been mainly responsible for getting marijuana to be rescheduled from a Schedule I drug to a Schedule III drug. But it's still a controlled substance. It shouldn't be controlled. It should be out there just like thyme and sage and all those other herbs and spices. So the legal argument has helped advance the cause. It's even gotten the notice taken by the White House to reschedule marijuana, but it has not been enough. Now we enter the second argument that has been chief in pushing marijuana forward, and that is the medicinal argument. This has been an even more effective argument. The argument has been that marijuana really is a medicine, and it needs to be taken for a range of afflictions, from sleep disorders, to anxiety, to inflammation, to coping with Alzheimer's, perhaps. There are lots of areas where research has yet to be done and is just now taking place that marijuana has been rescheduled as a Schedule III drug. We're going to see just the beginning of all kinds of breakthroughs on what marijuana can do for a person's health. The medicinal argument has allowed the dispensary system to spread through most states, wherein you can go inside a facility that is administered by the government and you can get safe counsel from a resident pharmacist on what kind of marijuana product is best for you. The dispensary system has been absolutely wonderful. But as I detailed in an earlier video in this lecture series, getting into one is a bit of a humiliating affair going through those double doors. So the medicinal marijuana argument has really helped marijuana to gain widespread acceptance amongst the general public, because people, if they agree that something helps you medicinally, it's less likely they'll be opposed to it morally. And that is what's happened to marijuana. But it has not been enough. Marijuana really should be advanced by a third argument, and that is the philosophy that comes with marijuana. As the great writer and former editor of High Times Ed Rosenthal said, marijuana doesn't tell you what to think. It tells you how to change the way that you think. If you look at life, it's a sequence of events, and many of these events are jarring to us. For example, getting out of a car where you're with a bunch of friends, that's one event. And then going into a household full of people that you never knew, and now you're meeting them for the first time, and it may be awkward, that's another event. What happens in between? That's where marijuana comes in with its transition advisor self. Because marijuana focuses your mind on that in-between point. It helps you change from one situation which is radically different from the situation you're about to go to by helping you take a step back and gain an air of detachment and humor and confidence so that when you go into that new situation, your transition has been made smooth by marijuana. Now, transitions don't just occur in brief moments in our lives. They also occur over the period of years. You can have a transition phase between your former self and your next self, depending on what stage you're at in your life. Transitions can be an in-between stage that take a long time. And marijuana is very helpful with that because it helps your outlook. It helps you take that step back and make that connection between the situation that you're leaving behind and the new one that you're going to. And it makes a smooth landing because you bring into that mix, rather than a jarring change in circumstances, you're able to create a flow in your mind where one event somehow fits into the next event, I can't describe what that is. That's what makes you an individual person. You have to think of that yourself. But it is with the assistance of marijuana that helps you get there. So marijuana is taken in by people not just because it's legal, not just because it's medicinal, but because it is a healthy pleasure. And why is it a healthy pleasure? Because it is constantly helping you in those transitionary moments in your life as your transition advisor. It's always there for you, and it's always accessible if you can get to those places where you can get to. So in the end, when you think about marijuana and all the struggles it's been through, all the forces that have tried to suppress it, and yet somehow that little green sprout has come back through the ground, and it's coming back strong. Is there a better substance that you would rather spend your time with than marijuana? That's a question that only you can answer. But we do know the Doxa that is put as a ring around the collar of marijuana is being cracked. It has a ways to go. And when it's done, marijuana will be out in the open, just like everything else. That's all we ask.